Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Pentecost with APA Virginia staff. Thank you for joining us for our monthly webinar series, Your Hour with APA Virginia, sponsored by today's presenters with the Berkley Group. Our webinars are the fourth Monday of each month from noon to 1 p.m., covering different topics in the planning fields. Today we have Denise Nelson and Darren Coffey from the Berkley Group presenting Translating Planning Goals into Project Actions for Sustainable Communities. They will take all questions at the end. Please type them in the questions box. You'll see that on the bar on the right side of your screen. You can visit apavirginia.com/webinars for CM credit information. If you're watching this live, you can get 1 CM credit today. And we'll post this to our YouTube page within 24 hours. Please mark your calendars for next month's webinar on December 18th with Danville City Councilman Lee Vogler talking about his land bank legislation. Note that this is moved up to the third Monday in December in observance of the holidays. In other news, APA Virginia is pleased to announce the 2018 annual conference, Mountains of Influence at Wintergreen Resort on July 22nd through 25th, 2018. Visit apavirginia.com for information on call for proposals, award nominations, and sponsorship opportunities. And I will now hand it over to Darren and Denise.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Darren Coffey. I'm the CEO for the Berkley Group, and I'm here with Denise Nelson. She is our environmental engineer, and not only is she a licensed engineer, but she's also LEED certified and an Envision specialist through the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, who she also used to work for. She is the only approved in-person trainer in Virginia, and so we're honored to have her with us. Before we get started, I do want to say that we're also honored to be sponsors of this series, and it's particularly rewarding when we get to actually do one of these sessions as opposed to just sponsoring it. So really with that, I'm going to turn it over to Denise and let her take us through today's presentation.
Thank you, Darren. Today we're going to talk about the Envision rating system and guidance for sustainable infrastructure. As an environmental engineer, I like to think about how we can turn all of these goals that we have from comprehensive planning, sustainability planning, and turn them into actions we can take on individual projects. First, I'd like to start with this big overarching goal that applies to many different professions in our industry, is that we would like to create sustainable and resilient communities. Now, I know that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. There's a lot of definitions for sustainability and resilience. And so I'd like us to zero in on the same definition for sustainable development that came out from the UN Brundtland Commission report in 1987 that basically says we will enjoy our quality of life with the necessities that we would like to have without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, their needs might be different than ours, but we don't want to limit them in any way from being enjoying a quality of life like we are today. Now, there are lots of resources available from national organizations, even APA and APWA, on sustainable communities. Some focus on planning, design, some focus on management and community outreach. Some focus on greenhouse gases specifically, but there are a lot of national resources out there. I've listed a few on this slide. And then there are a lot of different mechanisms for achieving this goal of creating sustainable infrastructure and sustainable communities. There are a lot of different community plans. There's a long list here: comprehensive planning, sustainability planning, all of these different plans where communities can identify and describe the goals that they have. And then there are a lot of policy tools that come out to help make those plans become enforceable. So there are codes, ordinances, design standards, procurement. There's an opportunity here to require certain sustainability aspects or to require certain sustainability tools, such as Envision, the one I'm going to talk about today. Zeroing in a little bit more from that wide array of resources and mechanisms, I'm listing here a lot of the major tools for sustainable infrastructure. You're all probably familiar with the LEED Green Building Program for sustainable buildings. There's also green globes for green buildings, and then BREEAM USA is relatively new on the maintenance for sustainable buildings. But there's also rating systems for different types of infrastructure. Green Roads, Invest, and others specifically look at roads and highways. Sustainable Sites is about the built landscaping environment. There's guidance out there for airports and seaports and a lot of other different types of infrastructure. The one I'm showing here on the end is Envision. And where Envision comes in is that it is flexible and adaptable for all types of infrastructure. So it's very important here that it's not narrowly focused on only roads or only energy transmission lines. But then the other major focus is that it looks at all project phases. So Envision does encourage you to think through the planning of the infrastructure projects and then consider what you can decide in the design phase to help the operations phase, the maintenance phase, and maybe even long-term deconstruction be more sustainable. So that's what we're going to focus on today, the Envision guidance for sustainable infrastructure. So here I have a few brief bullet points summarizing the highlights of Envision. First is that it is for all civil infrastructure. It was originally developed for individual projects of all infrastructure types and to look at all project phases. It is applicable to publicly owned and privately owned infrastructure. Why would you want to use Envision on these projects? As an environmental engineer, I'm a lead AP and I learned a lot of the sustainability concepts, but I wasn't able to apply LEED to my water pipeline or my wastewater treatment plant, and it was a little unfulfilling. So this rating system was created by people in the same position as myself in order to get a comprehensive list of best practices that can be applied on infrastructure projects. To make sure that we're addressing the entire triple bottom line, we want to go beyond just the financial and economic impacts to look at the social side and the environmental side. And then if we have one standard framework, we can consistently develop and compare the progress and performance on different types of projects. So we'll be reporting on the success of a green road or a green bridge, and we can compare projects across the state or even in different states. So how is Envision offered? There are several free tools that come out from their parent group, the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. The website's at the bottom of the page. The Envision pre-assessment checklist is a very quick Excel file that includes all of the Envision sustainability concepts in a simple yes or no format so that you can evaluate the concepts quickly, maybe an hour or two for any given project, and just get a feel for how Envision works and the broad range of concepts that are covered. If you want to go in depth and explore each of those concepts, you can download the guidance manual for free. This is about 200 pages. It's a PDF or you could view it online. And then this includes the detailed scoring. So ISI, the Institute, offers an online score sheet where you can do the calculation online. You can certainly do the calculation offline, but the benefit of the online score sheet is that you can invite your colleagues to collaborate with you online and help you with the evaluation. And you can also update the evaluation over time. So you can even do some alternatives analysis to see how that would impact your score. I wanted to give you a brief introduction to the concepts that are in Envision. There are 60 credits. These are each individual sustainability concepts. We don't have time to go through them all today, but at ISI's website, you'll find the guidance manual describing them all. And there's also a nice summary one-page brochure that lists them all. I do have time, though, to categorize them and discuss the 5 different groups. The first grouping of credits looks at the community quality of life. So there are 13 credits here that are big picture planning level type credits that ask the questions, how does this project impact the individuals and their well-being? But then how does it impact the greater community as a whole and the social fabric? So here we're talking about being in alignment with long-term development plans, supporting continued sustainable growth and development, looking at mobility and transit, looking at historic resources, cultural resources, in all, just trying to make the community a more desirable place that people want to live and work in. The next category is the leadership category. This is where the questions focus on the project team. And in this case, it's not just the owner, the planner, the designer, the construction team, but it's also the stakeholders, the regulators, all of the other people that are involved that will be developing or using the infrastructure. Do they have a common agreement on the sustainability criteria and working together to meet those goals? The next category is resource allocation. So here we're looking at credits that address the resources that are brought in to build and maintain infrastructure projects, but also any waste that's taken away that might be a resource for someone else. So some examples here are, of course, energy and water efficiency or renewable resources, buying recycled resources, buying local products, things like that. The next category is natural world. So this category looks at the environment and the place where the infrastructure will be built. Of course, there's going to be impacts while construction is underway, but what can we do in planning and designing to minimize those impacts during construction, but also help the infrastructure fit in a more synergistic way so that we're minimizing negative impacts on wetlands, on floodplains, on ecosystems, and that we're supporting the long-term operation of the natural systems so that there's still species migration and the floodplain functions. Last, the last category is climate and risk. Here there are several credits that look at air pollution and specifically greenhouse gas pollutants that contribute to climate change. And then any of the risks and vulnerabilities that might come into play in your project area. So it could be the larger impacts from climate change, more extreme storm events, flooding, sea level rise, or it could be some other types of local or man-made hazards, wildfires, terrorist attacks, any other type of vulnerability. And so this adds up to 60 credits where we look at all of the different ways that you can approach a project and incorporate more sustainable practices. Now, I did want to point out that beyond each of the 60 credits, they are not just yes, no questions. They each might have up to 5 levels of achievement. So there's a lot of opportunity here to choose which credits make sense on your project and then set targets for performance. If you have an entry level level of performance, the Envision system calls that improved, and you would get points for that towards your score. But then the Envision system defines what it would mean to move to enhanced, superior, conserving, or even restorative, and it increases the points that are awarded to incentivize you to try to reach beyond entry-level opportunities. And so Envision says there are requirements already for conventional planning and design. When you look at an infrastructure project, there are regulations. There are all the things you need to do to be in compliance. And Envision is asking you to do more. And it sets up these incremental steps for improvement to encourage you to do more. And then above and beyond that, there are bonus points, bonus credits for innovation. So if you do anything above and beyond what's requested, or if you come up with something clever and innovative that is not included in Envision right now, you can get additional points for that. So those are, that's a brief description of the Envision Guidance Manual and the credits that are included. You can use all of those resources for free on the sustainableinfrastructure.org website. There are a couple of other pay features that they offer. The first is a professional credential. There's a training program and an online exam if you want to get in-depth training on the credential and earn the certificate to prove that you are qualified to go through the full rating system on projects. You can do that. And then the last is a project verification and award program. So this is very much parallel to the LEED green building system, where you get a third party to review your project and your documentation, and you earn a plaque to put on the wall. And the levels here are cleverly named to mimic the USGBC rating plaques. So we have bronze, and then we move up through silver, gold, and platinum for the highest achieving projects. Here's a quick map of all of the projects in the North America that have earned Envision awards, and a few that are in the process. So there are 40 projects right now that have earned awards, and there's about 50 more around the world that are in the process. 2 of these projects are in Virginia. The rest of the projects, they come from about 20 states. So what we're seeing is that this rating system is appropriate for many different regions and climates and the different types of issues that pop up in different states. I did just want to show you briefly the wide variety of project types that are using the Envision rating system. So the majority of projects have come from AEC firms and communities, the owners, the municipalities in the water and transportation sectors. But there are quite a few land, energy, and waste projects. And then if we look specifically at water, we can see there's water collection and distribution, treatment, and then even different types of stormwater projects that are using Envision and getting recognized. And then we also have several different types of transportation projects: roads, airports, seaports, trolley cars, mass transit. So we're seeing immediately that a lot of different types of projects are testing Envision and finding that it is really flexible and adaptable. So I wanted to take a minute to update you on how Envision is being adopted in Virginia. There are several, 2 projects with awards, and then several other communities here in blue dots that are looking at using Envision in one way or another. I wanted to let you know one of the first people to adopt the use of Envision in 2011 was the Reston Association. They already had a policy in place to use LEED to develop green buildings, and they went ahead and added to that policy that they would use Envision for all of the other infrastructure in the association area. Newport News and Norfolk have started looking at Envision and requiring it, asking for it in individual project RFPs. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the remaining locations. The first project to earn an award from Envision in Virginia is the Alexandria Renew Sanitation District's Nutrient Management Facility. They earned a platinum award, the highest award. What's interesting about this project is that it's a wastewater treatment plant in a very confined space in Alexandria and serving Fairfax and surrounding neighbors. They had sustainability parameters in place. The design team working with them was tracking their performance, and they completed construction of the project, and this portion of the project is under that soccer field. So they were able to make this storage and advanced treatment facility and integrate it with the brand new apartment building to the right and provide a public park, a full-size soccer field. And what they did after the project was completed was go back and look at the Envision rating system. They wanted to see if Envision was up to par with their high standards. And they evaluated the project. It ranked very high, the platinum, the highest level. And so they decided to submit it for an award to go through that process of the third-party review for confirmation. And they were so pleased at the end of the process, they said that from now on, they're going to be using Envision on all their projects. They really like the idea of having a rating system and guidance that is open source and available for all of their in-house professionals, but also their hired professionals, the consultants, to use one standard language to incorporate sustainability. The next example is a project in Virginia Beach. This was a parks project, so very different from the wastewater treatment project. This was a project that earned a silver award, addressing a lot of different types of credits here, mostly focusing on the natural worlds and also incorporating that social aspect, making sure that this fit in and served the community's needs as a park with trails, and it incorporated the feedback from all the local stakeholders. Now, there's some communities that are adopting Envision in slightly different ways. Here's Hampton Roads Sanitation District. This is the wastewater authority in the Hampton Roads area. All of the cities and communities there feed into this major trunk line and treatment system. And they have on page 1 of their design standards that all firms they work with will use the Envision checklist when designing projects. So this is a good way for a community to start collecting the data in a standardized format so they can track how the individual projects are performing, but also aggregate that data to see the influence of Envision over time. Now, they've said maybe someday they'll take a project for an award, but right now the priority for them is just to use the guidance. The next group is the Roanoke Stormwater Department. They have started requiring that all of their staff in the department get trained and earn the credential. I've actually been down there twice and trained 2 different groups of staff. One of them, Danielle Bishop, was very excited about figuring out how they could use Envision to help with their specific initiatives. So she took on a project of evaluating recently completed infrastructure projects in Envision to figure out where they fell in that matrix of scores. And she found that they had some low scores, but that's not necessarily bad because Envision helps you go above compliance. So they were finding that they were in the realm of 5 or 10% above compliance. So they were doing extra already. So then she sat down and thought, well, what if I use Envision and I try to incorporate the credits that are reasonable and the levels of achievement that are reasonable for us and feasible? So she did an assessment of materials that she could buy locally and some of the other ideas that jumped out, like stakeholder engagement. And she went back and she reevaluated those projects and found that she could double her score in Envision. So she found a way using Envision to document her performance and then initiate improvements. They're not quite to the level where they would be earning awards, but that's fine because they are making improvements to their procedures and their projects, and that's the most important thing. This report is available on their website. It's a wonderful read. I recommend it. Next, I want to point out Fairfax County. I went and trained them a couple of weeks ago now. 23 staff members came to this computer lab so that we could work through a full day training session. The very next day, they came back and they took the exam. And my report from them was that by the end of the day, everybody had passed the exam. So Fairfax County now has at least 23 people with a credential in different subgroups under the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services, but also in planning and in vehicle services and in Parks and Rec. And now these are the leaders to go back to those groups and initiate trials on projects. And so I hope to be hearing a lot from them over the next few months on how this is going. And then one more example from Blacksburg. I did go meet with them a couple of weeks ago and talked about Envision, a high-level introduction to all of their different department heads pictured here. And then we went through an exercise of evaluating a high-profile project in the checklist, the sort of quick and easy version. We were able to get through the checklist in about an hour and a half, and it really helped them identify the sustainability strengths of the projects and the opportunities and where they might want to focus on future projects. So how can Envision help you? This is the headline, the title of the project, of the presentation today. I think the benefit of Envision is that it helps you take these high-level goals like protecting air quality and turning it into individual actions that you can take on individual infrastructure project. So if you took actions on every project, that would really make a big difference in the community. And then finally, Envision encourages you to make sure that you're documenting those improvements and those achievements, and then they can be aggregated and reported back out as successes. Envision was originally intended as a design tool. The first group that started the effort to create Envision was the American Society of Civil Engineers, but they very quickly pulled in the American Public Works Association and the American Council of Engineering Companies. And they said, we need to make sure we have one tool that everybody in the infrastructure industry can use instead of having competing tools. So they started looking at how to improve design projects. Now this picture here looks at a building, but it's a pumping station for a wastewater treatment system. It is not a building that would be appropriate for a LEED credential. There are several things inherent to the design of this building. It's in a neighborhood, so it had to be somewhat aesthetically pleasing. It had to be quiet and odorless and allow for a lot of flexibility in the operations of the pumps and the force mains. But what else could we do? Envision helps you identify a lot of other things just to consider. None of them are required, but they help to get the discussion going on options you can do with the roof. Perhaps put solar panels to collect energy for redundancy, or collect that rainwater to use it to water the lawn or make it available to the neighbors. There are questions there about the species that are planted and the types of materials that are used. So Envision is just there to help you think of these other ideas that you could incorporate. And then people very quickly realized that Envision can go beyond the realm of one project and be used as a planning tool. The first concept is that Envision very quickly asks, is this the right project? So as an environmental engineering consultant in my past, I would be asked to design a pipeline. So somebody had already made the decision that a pipeline was necessary. But Envision really makes you sit down and think, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? And what is the right solution that is in line with the community's values and their long-term development goals? Is it a larger pipeline? Is it an extra lane on a roadway? Is it a transit system? What is the best solution to the problem? And then beyond that, okay, we know what we want to build. How do we make that more sustainable? You can go through Envision and get some ideas on what's reasonable for your project and help flush out that scope. It's also very helpful as a metric system because you can evaluate conceptual alternatives and get a little bit more of a description of those alternatives for making your decision. Envision doesn't tell you what to choose. In this example I'm showing here, the highest Envision score is alternative 1. The colors are the 5 different Envision categories. You might choose that because it scored so well. Or you might choose alternative 2 because the orange represents quality of life. And in this project, this community, that quality of life consideration is the most important thing. So Envision just helps you categorize these alternatives in a different way to help you make a more informed decision. And in the same respect, you can do this when you have a list of projects, a CIP list, a master plan, and you don't have enough money right away to do them all. You can do this to help identify the projects where you're getting more benefit beyond just the initial infrastructure development, where you're adding green infrastructure elements, where you're really considering the stakeholders and finding more synergies. Going beyond that, I did just want to point out that the Zofnass program for sustainable infrastructure at the Harvard Graduate School of Design helped develop the Envision rating system. And their goal is to do the research behind the development. And so once Envision was put into practice in 2012, they went on to thinking about the next step. Well, how do we plan a sustainable city? If infrastructure is for individual projects, do we piece those projects together and call it a sustainable city? Or do we need to do more to think of the city at a systems level? And so they just recently published this book that builds upon the Envision credits and goes and looks at the bigger holistic view of a city. And then lastly, as far as the project phases go, Envision is a tool that helps aid the construction and O&M practices. A lot of the credits here are designed to direct sustainable practices in the construction phase and also encourage accounting of the reduced use of materials and the other performance achievements in construction and also in operations and maintenance. Envision is also very helpful as a communications tool. There are a lot of communities that have used the Envision credits or at least a handful of them to lead community meetings with their stakeholders to help keep the stakeholders on task and on focus with how you can approach sustainability in infrastructure without going, off on a tangent into climate change and some of the other more controversial subjects. But what I really like about this is it gives us another way to describe a project, to have a press release, to have an awards ceremony, to celebrate the achievements that we're doing and make sure we're getting recognition for the smart design and all of the synergies, and not just, always hearing the bad news about water main breaks or failing bridges. So one thing we did for curiosity's sake back at the office the other day was look at the FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program community rating system. We know there are lots and lots of communities in Virginia that are participating in the community rating system, and it focuses on floodplains and resilience and sustainability and a lot of the concepts that are in Envision. So we walked through the two rating systems. My colleague Shayna Schaefer is a CFM, so we were sharing our expertise here, and we found that 11 of the 19 CRS activities are covered in the Envision rating system, and then conversely, 15 of the Envision credits are covered in the CRS system. So if you're a community that's doing one of these, it doesn't take that much more effort to try the other one on a project. If it's an infrastructure project affecting a floodplain, there's a synergy there. And in fact, I know it's very difficult to get the highest CRS score. I believe there's only one community in the country that has it. But if you achieve the highest targets set out in the CRS, you would be so close to earning the bronze award in Envision, just based on the, the natural world and the floodplain and the resiliency aspects already covered in the rating system. So there is alignment here, there's a synergy, and we think that there would be a similar type of alignment with some of the other systems out there. I'm listing a few here that Public Works and Public Utilities use, and these are more how they manage and operate their system, the staff and the physical infrastructure. But there's a lot of overlap there on how you can use Envision on individual projects and have the results feed back into the reporting, either for FEMA or for APWA accreditation or other programs. And so finally, this is my last slide. I always like to end with this slide. Today's focus was on Envision. I was hoping that I could help clarify, first introduce Envision, but also clarify its role in the industry. It's definitely appropriate to use the right tool for the job. But these closing thoughts I have for you are more general for the industry. It's first, I would recommend everybody look for opportunities to make incremental improvements on every project. Every project counts, and every project can contribute to the greater goals of the community. And then I would recommend that you use some sort of standardized or open source tools so that you can track that information, and it's in a way that's shareable and comparable to other communities and to other types of projects. Definitely document what you're doing so you can track your performance over time, not just the performance of the infrastructure, but also the results of the decisions you made when you were planning and designing. And then finally, please report those results and share your lessons learned, perhaps at the APA Virginia conference at Wintergreen, or in a newsletter, or with your neighbors, so that we can all benefit from that scientific data and improve our projects. And thank you so much for your time. And now I'd like to open it up to questions.
And before we get into questions, Denise, I just want to say that one of the things that's impressed me most about Envision is it's a tool, like you said, it's an open source tool that really tries to do in a practical way what I think a lot of planning professionals, a lot of local government professionals have been trying to do for many years. We have a Change in Local Government series where we talk about finance and budgeting and transportation infrastructure, economic development. And it really is kind of, how can everybody from different disciplines who work in this industry help each other? And instead of just being in your own planner bubble or your own engineer bubble or your own finance bubble, how can you work together? How can you educate each other across those different professions toward the good of the locality? And to me, this is a tool that is it's not simple, but yet it is. It's very elegant. It cuts across all those cross sections, and it really achieves, I think, in a very effective way, what a lot of us professionals have been trying to do for a long time. And I have one question to kick it off, and then I'll see if Sarah has any more that have come in. This tool, Envision, has been out for, I guess, about 6 years now. Are there any updates coming, or are there any plans for routine updates or different versions or anything like that?
Very good question. There is an update coming. Over the last few months, there was a call for input. The Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure has staff, and they have several committees of experts around the country, public and private and academic, that volunteer to review the Envision credits and their performance over time, but also look at the changes in the industry and the environment and recommend updates. And so the last couple of months, they made available a list of credits that have changed or that have been added, and the public was invited to comment on those. We at the Berkley Group sent in a long list. Right now, the Institute is compiling all of those comments, and they expect what they'll call version 3, Envision version 3, to come out in about March timeframe, 2018. So the current version, the version that has been in use for 6 years, is version 2. It resulted from a similar Q&A period back in 2011. And so with the 40 projects that have gone through Envision, we've been able to see and talk to a lot of professionals about the credits and the appropriateness. And so this new version will come out in, like I said, March 2018, and there'll be some overlap with the two versions. And people will be able to use both, and to use both on projects for awards for a couple of years. And there will be a transition fully to version 3. And a key thing that's going to happen is that right now projects, when they get an Envision award, it's called a planning and design award. So you can get the award at the end of the design phase. There's no requirement to wait until the end of construction, although you can. And there's no requirement for a site visit at the end of construction. So the award is for the intent and how you carried it out in planning and design. When the new version kicks in fully, it will cover planning and design, and then there'll be an add-on part for the construction phase, and they will combine to make an award for the project.
So Sarah, have we received any other questions, or do you have any questions?
Yep,
As we enter
I
that
have a
part of
couple things here. First, I have a message from the president, George Homewood. He says, "Thanks, Darren, for sponsoring the series."
You're welcome.
And then I have two questions here. The first one from myself: are there continuing education or maintenance requirements for the ENBSP credential?
That's a good question. First, I'd like to reiterate that the credential is not required to use Envision. You can get the guidance manual and study it on your own and start using it on your own. And that's one of the reasons they make it free, is so people can take their time studying it, but also using the online tools. Beyond that, though, if you want to get it done in a day or 2 days, you can do the online course, the in-person course, and take the exam, earn the credential. Right now, there's no continuing education requirement for the credential. The Institute is waiting until that new version comes out next year. And they anticipate that late summer, there will be an update. Anybody that's already an ENBSP will be expected to attend a 2-hour webinar to learn about the changes in Envision. And that will update their credential and enroll them in a 1-year maintenance program. They haven't released the details of what will be required in that maintenance program, but because Envision is appropriate for planners and designers and geologists and people with all different types of degrees and professional licensure, they've committed that they will make sure the requirement is not extensive or expensive and will not require PDHs or CEUs above and beyond what's required by the other licenses. There just might be some questions specific to sustainable practices or specific to the application of Envision on your projects.
So the answer is yes, but minimal.
Next year, there will be, it'll start next year.
And for those people who are like me and don't have the attention span they used to and want to get in-person training, you provide that?
Yes, I'm the only trainer in Virginia. There's a really great online training program. It's 7 one-hour modules that you can take from any computer on your own time. You can start and stop and all of that. But if you prefer to learn in person, or if you prefer to learn with your colleagues that you actually work together day to day on projects, I would recommend the in-person training, because the training curriculum is slightly different, because when I'm there with you, I want to take advantage of the fact that we're all there and we can have discussion and we can do group exercises. So it's almost a little bit of sustainability team building, if you will. And I can make sure that I answer any questions you have. The benefit of doing that then is you still have access to all of the online videos. So if you wanted to go back and watch them at any time, if you happen to forget about Envision for 6 months, but then you want to go get a refresher, you can go back and visit those modules at any time.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for answering that and so in depth. I have one more question here from Seth Dorman. He asks, are communities using Envision to assist in obtaining state or federal funds for their infrastructure projects? If so, are the states and the federal government recognizing the validity of the tool and using it to make funding decisions?
Will you check the Go Green website real quick? That's a great question. It is starting to happen. For instance, there's in California, a specific example I can give you. The California Department of Water Resources doesn't have projects, but they help manage the loans and the grants that are given out to communities with their projects. And they have written in their requirements that if you go for Envision Gold or Silver, you can get an increased amount in your funds, so that there is that benefit there. Other communities are, in the federal government, are still exploring Envision and making sure that they really understand how to quantify the benefits, and then they can understand how to work that into any financial incentives. I don't have specific examples for you right now, but I know that there are communities here in Virginia that are asking for Envision. If you're a consultant, they're asking for it in their RFPs. So if you don't have it, if you don't know it, you're at a disadvantage. And then there are communities that are using this as they're describing it as an innovative approach when they apply for those grants, so that they can document and prove that they are considering green infrastructure or stakeholder involvement. And again, that's why Envision is so helpful, having that being a standard language that everybody can go and look at and agree upon as not just greenwashing, but actually getting real sustainable projects.
All right. And I have one more question here from Ed Gilliland. He asked, can you provide an example of an energy project?
Yes, I can. One of the projects that earned an award was the construction of windmills out in the Midwest. And it's a real interesting project because it's a wildlife preserve. And they go in and they're constructing these windmills, and they don't want to build a lot of roads to bring in the infrastructure and the equipment, but they have to because it's big infrastructure and big equipment. But this is a project that is very simplistic in the fact that it has a very limited list of materials. They're building concrete bases, but then they're installing these prefabricated metal windmills. And then they have to open the land up again to the wildlife and to the hunters and monitor that they didn't actually have any negative impacts on the species and the habitats.
All right. So thank you again. That's all the questions we have. So thanks for presenting with us today. Thank you for sponsoring this series and for a successful webinar today. Again, join us December 18th. That's the third Monday of December due to the holidays. December 18th, we'll have Danville City Councilman Lee Vogler talking about land bank legislation, and you can find that registration link on apavirginia.com/webinars. Again, thanks for joining us today, and have a great rest of your Monday.
Thank you for having us. Y'all have a great week and a great holiday season coming up.